be a great skill for dating. Like I bet, like in relationships, like sometimes you've got to pull up a PowerPoint slides in some of those relationships. You know what I'm saying? It's like, no, why are you not understanding my point? This is what I'm trying to tell you. Why you're pissing me off? You know? This is why you're wrong. Yeah.
Definitely a skill that comes in handy. Not going to lie.
Welcome back. We are on today with my guest Brenden on the Too Old for This Shit podcast. I'm your host, Angie Sorensen. You can come and find me at angies.com. That's angie-s.com. Or on my Linktree at linktree/Too Old for This Shit, spelled with SHIT, no asterisk on this one. Now, those are the places to go if you want to be part of my community, get involved with what I do, and have direct access to me. So, if you haven't yet, please share this podcast with your friends, rate, review, subscribe to it on Apple Podcasts, or follow it on Spotify, or from anywhere you listen to from, whichever way you show love on this, please do it. That is how you can support this show. The more you do that, the more it helps new listeners discover this show. It takes 2 seconds and it's completely free for you to do. Today's episode is on public speaking and also actually how to focus on doing what matters to you when it comes to having a YouTube channel or doing a podcast or anything like this that has to do with public speaking, but not necessarily a TED Talk, just all kinds of public speaking. It could even be like, doing a presentation at work, that's public speaking as well. And if you have to do it on Zoom, that's also public speaking. So without further ado, let's begin. Hi, Brenden. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Angie. It's great to be here.
Yeah, thank you for joining me today. Look, I'm excited to have you on the podcast because, I checked out your YouTube. I thought you had, I think you have like a great vibe. And there was a couple of videos I was like, oh, we need to talk about this. So today we're going to talk about public speaking and like the listeners are going to be like, wait, this is so not what you normally talk about. I'm like, no, that's right. But nowadays, this is like a skill that's not just left to like politicians, entertainers. Public speaking has just hit us all into our home, with the way we work and do business, like Zoom and Instagram lives, anyone, like all of these things can really, it's kind of nerve-wracking for most people. This is like one of the number one fears to talk in public. Never mind the boardroom before, but now you're behind the screen and you potentially talk to a lot more people. So I really wanted to have your input on this and see if you could, help listeners, how they can just manage, whether it's a boardroom, an Instagram live, a YouTube video they have to do for their company, whatever it is. So before we dive in, please introduce yourself, where you live and what you do, Brenden.
Yeah, of course. So my name's Brenden. I'm the founder of MasterTalk, which, as you alluded to, is a YouTube channel I started to help people with their communication skills and their public speaking. And how I got started, and I'm based in Montreal, is I was in university, and I used to do these things called case competitions. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So other guys my age were playing football or rugby or cricket or some other sport that I wasn't very well equipped to do. I applied that same competitive spirit but to presentations. So for 3 years, I presented hundreds of times, coached dozens of people on their communication and public speaking skills. And then after I graduated and I got a job in the corporate world, I just asked myself a simple question, which was, how do I make a difference in the world? And that's when the idea for the channel came to be, because I realized a lot of the communication stuff sucked on YouTube. So I thought I'd make videos in my basement, and then the rest was history.
Okay. So can I just check with you? When you say case competition, is it like the debate team? Is that
it's similar?
What was it doing? Like you was presenting cases like a university, or what do you mean?
Yeah, I'm happy to expand on that. So essentially what a case competition is, Angie, is like a business gives you a problem. And then based on that problem, you have to solve it and present a solution back to them. Okay. So I'll give you a super easy example. Let's say we both own a fast food restaurant. Okay, let's say we sell ice cream. Yeah. So then they come up to us and they go, well, Brenden, Angie, no one's eating ice cream anymore because everyone wants to be health conscious. Everyone wants to eat salads. Now they don't have time for ice cream. So how do we get those people back into the ice cream shops? So this is an example of a business problem. So what we need to do is we need to find a solution, make slides, and then present it back who are generally the executives of that ice cream store. So that's what a case competition is. I know it's weird, but some people in the world do this for fun.
Okay, so it's basically like making sure that you basically put your point across and win someone over, almost like with wherever you're presenting, so that they sort of like agree with you, right?
You got it. So let's say a
Yeah.
company would go through like 7 student teams. They would pick the best solution, the second best, and that person would generally win like an internship at their company or something like that.
So that
So,
must be a great skill for dating. Like I bet, like
yeah.
like in relationships, like 'cause sometimes you've got to pull up a PowerPoint slides in some of those relationships. You know what I'm saying? It's like, no, why are you not understanding my point? This is what I'm trying to tell you. Why you're pissing me off? You know,
Yeah. No,
this is why you're wrong. Yeah.
definitely a skill that comes in handy, not going to
Mhm.
lie.
Okay, so then you saw like, you looked at what was around and you thought, you know what, I can offer something different. What is the thing that you do that's different from what you did, the thing that you saw on YouTube? Like how all of a sudden you went, you know what, I've got this experience in case studies and I'm just gonna, sorry, case competition. And I am now going to show people how to be focused on this one part, which is like the public speaking, the presentation part.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the big thing, Angie, was there's a lot of YouTube videos that weren't focused on the areas that I usually focus on when I teach people. So the first thing is just the obvious one, like entertainment. The most public speaking videos on YouTube are very boring. They're
Mm.
given by like PhD academics who literally talk like this, and I'm just there like, how can you teach communication if you're not an exceptional speaker yourself? It just didn't make any sense to me. And the other side of it was back to the academic world. A lot of the jargon that we were talking about before that we started rolling
Mm.
it is wildly used in this industry. So you have words like glossophobia or extemporaneous speeching. I don't even know how to pronounce some of these words sometimes
Yeah.
myself. I'm just like, all this is useless. Like,
Yeah.
I do weird things. Like I compare public speaking to puzzle pieces and I use very simple analogies. And
Yeah.
then the third thing was just production quality. I thought a lot of the production out there was really bad. So after a year of filming, I went professional with my videos. So those are, I would say, the 3 big things.
Okay. Okay. So can you tell us, if we go like to the start, like if someone's listening in, they may go like, what should I learn about public speaking? Like, what's your answer to that?
Yeah, of course. I think the first thing I always start with, Angie, is this idea that public speaking has very little to do with presentations. A lot of us think of it like, oh, public speaking is me presenting in front of a classroom or speaking on video or starting a YouTube channel. No, no, no. Public speaking is every interaction you have with everyone around you. It's the tough conversations you have with your family or your loved
Yeah.
ones.
Mm.
It's the great conversations you have with your friends over dinner. It's the way you talk to the delivery guy, to the person who serves you your food. Every interaction is public speaking. So once you realize that communication doesn't just help your dating life, as you allude to, your presentations, but rather your entire life, that's when you start to work on it a lot more.
Yeah, do you know, that's such a good point you bringing up, because I sometimes find like it's the small conversations that like, it's like, how do I tell the neighbor like a small thing, like like something about like the recycling bin, or like they've put stuff in and it's like it smells or whatever it is, like those little things like between neighbors, and like how am I going to say this without falling out with them but still putting my point across, not not being weak but still being assertive but not being a bitch. It's like all these little things, like they literally they really cross my mind. I'm like, okay, so how do I say this, like, because it's like it's a lot of it with conversations and discussions, a lot of it is also to do with boundaries, and and what's your line, and how flexible can you go, because you're always going to have to negotiate something a little bit, or it's sometimes like I think for a lot of people it causes a lot of stress. And especially now we're all like, most of us have been in lockdown, so even less interaction. So the minute you actually do have a real life interaction with someone, or you have to address something, we're a bit rusty, it's like how do we fare around in this world?
I'm with you.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Let's say if someone wants to go and do a TED talk, or do an actual presentation like that, how do we know whether we have something interesting or different to say, to to look forward to create to actually do a TED talk?
Right. The way I think about it, Angie, is it's more about, do you find your topic interesting enough? Because what I've always noticed is, generally speaking, if you're very passionate, you care a lot about your ideas, even if it's a cupcake business you started, there's almost always going to be another group of people who are interested in that same idea. So I think
Yeah.
so. For example, I mean, look at my YouTube channel. I mean, I'm talking about communication, public speaking. It's probably not as popular as the Super Bowl, right? But there's people in the world who will say, "Oh, I actually want to work on this skill," and those are the people I'm for. So I would say my recommendation is to focus. Look at all of the ideas you have in your life, and start ranking them based on your interests, and start showing them to your friends. Let's say you pick 3 5 ideas, and you just ask your friends if you're having trouble picking, and they'll say, oh, I like this one, I don't like this one because of X, Y, and Z reason. And it's through those conversations that you'll figure out what is the one idea you want to stick to. In the same way, I had a bunch of ideas for my YouTube channel, but the reason why I chose MasterTalk particularly was just because nobody else was doing it. Like, I felt I could really make a difference in that space versus just being, another one of 1,000 different channels on the same topic on something else.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, I love that you said if you're really passionate about something, and by the way, cupcakes, I mean, a lot of us are passionate about cupcakes.
That's true. Don't disagree on that one.
Exactly. But, like you said about, do whatever you're passionate about, something you're really into, because other people, the likelihood are other people are going to talk about it. That's actually that's how I do my thing. That's how I do the podcast. That's how I do my health and wellness. I'm like, okay, what is that I'm interested in? Because little by little, I'll discover also what other people want to hear. I'm like, oh, actually, I didn't think about that. Yeah, I want to cover that too. But you have to start with you. And then you'll expand. And then, other things that people throw at you will stick or they won't stick. And you do what, you've got to, but like you said, I'm a true believer in following your soul, what's inside of you, because that's going to be the bit that's really, that you've got the most power to enjoy and to create a change in whatever it is that you want to do with it. That's where you've got the most engine power, I feel, behind it, versus someone at work giving you something to do that you don't enjoy. It's going to take you longer to do, whether if you have a project you really enjoy. So I think when it's things like that, for sure, follow your own voice, basically. Your voice,
yeah, of course. And another way is just try a couple of presentations, not 18 minutes like TED, but maybe 2-3 minutes. Just pitch it to your friends, see, and if that's something that matters to you, you can have your friends kind of help you pick that topic. But it's not impossible, for sure.
So now that you mentioned about the duration, this would be a good segue to talk about how to format a speech. Is that something that you sort of have that you help people think about how they can start formatting a talk?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And this is actually going to be the easiest technique I share today. So if you just apply what I'm about to say, anyone who's listening, you'll easily 10x your communication skills.
Oh, nice.
So the method is called puzzle. So public speaking, Angie, is a lot like a jigsaw puzzle. You know those puzzle pieces you kind of do as a kid and probably do now because of COVID? So if I asked you, let's say you're working on this puzzle yourself with your friends or your family, which pieces would you start with first and why?
Well, I'll always start with the outside first.
Right. Yeah, don't worry. It's not a trick question.
No,
you're right. So why what's your rationale behind that?
Because there's at least two sides that I don't have to there's less side to fit with other ones, with other pieces. Because you have a smooth,
You got it, right? They're easier to fit together. There's a lot less options, so it's easier to fit those corner pieces.
Yeah, less pieces as well. Exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely. So now the question we need to ask ourselves is, why don't we do that in public speaking? We have a presentation in a boardroom, in a classroom, in a conference room. So what do? We start with the middle first. We start shoving a bunch of content. We get to the presentation. We ramble through the entire thing. And then we get to the last slide and it sounds something like this. Yeah, so thanks. That's probably 95% of all the presentations I hear. But much like jigsaw puzzles, if you start with the edges first you can master public speaking a lot faster. So what does that mean? That means practice your introduction 50 times, not 3 times, not 5 times. Do it 50 times. It's actually not that hard. It'll take you an hour because each introduction is probably a minute or two. Same thing with the conclusion. What's a great movie with a terrible ending? Last time I checked, terrible movie. So same thing. 50 times the conclusion in only 2 hours of practice, Angie. You look at your presentation and go, wow, I'm really good at this public speaking thing. And then you dive into the metal and you figure it out. But much like a jigsaw puzzle, who does puzzles on their own? I don't know anyone who tackles a 2,000-piece puzzle alone. That's why I recommend working as a team. Get a group of friends together, a community, people who want to see you win, people who can help you, and work together to solve the middle. And that's how you solve the public speaking puzzle.
I guess it's a good way to test whether what you're saying actually makes sense to other people, right? So let's say if you were to talk about a scientific topic to people who aren't scientists, but you wanted to teach them something around it or help them understand some particular,
Absolutely.
scientific topic. If yeah, exactly. If the people who are not scientists understand you, then that's you pretty much nailed it. If you can make it relatable, to people who are not in your industry.
Absolutely. That it's also an quick, easy win. Let's say going back to your TED example, that's an 18-minute speech. So you're looking at that daunted. You're like, oh, geez, how am I supposed to start this? But if you master the first minute, the first 2 minutes, the last 2 minutes, well, you just did 4 minutes of your 18-minute speech. You only got 14 left to go.
Yeah.
Right? So it creates that momentum that we want to see in public speaking. And you can apply that logic for literally any presentation for the rest of your life.
So, when you said to repeat the introduction and the outro 50 times, did you mean just so that you can to see whether it flows or to actually learn it by heart? Or what did you mean by repeating it 50 times?
Yeah, great follow-ups. So the reason why you want to do it 50 times is to deliver it exceptionally well. So I'll give you a best example with this very podcast. When I started guesting on shows,
yeah,
I sucked at answering questions. Somebody would ask me, hey, Brenden, where do you think the fear of public speaking comes from? I was like, I don't know, like the under your mattress or something. There's boogeymans or something. I don't know, right? Mm-hmm. But over time, when you do more shows and more shows, and you start to realize that the host is asking you the same set of questions. Right? Because, you're the communication expert, so you're going to answer communication questions. No one's going to come up to you and say, hey, Brenden, what's your favorite fruit? Right? No one's going to say that. So because I'm always answering those questions, I get much better at communicating the ideas from those questions.
Right. Yes. It's almost like you're refining your pitch.
Exactly.
Yeah. You follow a format. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Whereas most of us, we don't spend enough time on the delivery, not because we're bad speakers or anything, but it's just because of the nature of public speaking. If you're in a university and you have 8 different classes and 8 different presentations, you're not thinking in that way because you just want to survive. You just want to get through all 8, right? You finish your English presentation, you move on to your math one until you're done and you can take a break. Whereas the best speakers in the world only present 1 or 2 presentations in total, but they present it at a world-class level.
Okay, yeah. Do you have an example? This is just top of my head here. I was just thinking this, do you have any examples of an unusual speech that is actually super interesting? So let's say it was something around sellotape, but someone made that speech super, super interesting and engaging. Are there places that you could that are online that showcases things like that?
That's super fascinating. Yeah, absolutely. There is one that comes to mind right now. There's a TED Talk called "How to Sound Smart" at a TED Talk. I highly recommend that one. It's super funny. It's sarcastic in a way that he's essentially mocking TED, but he's giving a TED Talk himself on a TED stage.
Yeah,
and he's exceptionally talented speaker, and he says absolutely nothing during the entire speech. So it has 20 million views or something. That one's really good. And another one is My Journey in Spam Email by James Vice.
Yeah.
Essentially this guy who gets a spam email like we all do, and he decides to reply to it. And the whole story is what happens during that conversation. It's so funny. So that's two that come to mind.
Well, because I don't think there's many who actually do answer to spam email, because I just delete them straight away.
Exactly.
So damn it, yeah, that's gonna be. Is that on TED Talk? The journey on spam email?
Yep, both of them. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, thank you for that, Brenden. Thank
Of course.
you. Before we go into the next part of, before we go over to the next segment, do you teach people about voice exercises? Have you had to warm up before they do a talk?
Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about warming up or any of those things. What I would focus instead on, Angie, and it's not because vocal exercises don't work, but because it just creates more stress. A lot of speech coaches, they recommend, oh, Angie, you should breathe for 7 minutes. But my opinion is, well, if you're breathing for 7 minutes, you're only thinking about the fear around public speaking. You're not really thinking about anything else. You're acknowledging the fear. I think the better strategy is to always look at the big picture. Why are we mastering communication? And a question I can ask and this is probably the best form I can give you, is the following question that I want you to reflect on. The question is, how would the world change if you were an exceptional communicator? If you were one of the best speakers out there, how would the world be different? And that answer is going to be different for all of you. For some of you, it might be being a better podcast host, like in your case, Angie. For me, it might be better being a better YouTuber. I mean, who's going to listen to a speech coach who doesn't know how to speak, right? And for others, it might just be, I'm always arguing with my wife all the time, but because of communication, I have a lot less arguments. I'm not married, but as an example for somebody else. So it's all about figuring out what that reason is for you and pursuing that.
No, do you know what? It's interesting you said that, because I mean, I do a little bit like before sometimes, like especially if I'm tense during the day, because I've got quite a tense jaw. I grind my teeth at night, so I do something stupid like this, like just to check I'm I'm chill, because you can't do that raspberry noise if you're tense. It's like you can't whistle if you're laughing, or all this kind of stuff. You have to be relaxed. But what I actually do find, which I think maybe like in a roundabout way is a little bit what you were saying as well, is that it's a lot to do with the feeling behind your words. So if I'm not confident, or if I'm tired, or if I'm feeling really insecure that day, or if I'm in a bad mood, or whatever it is, my speech, like my list comes out. I can't say my words properly. My accent comes out even more, which I don't mind that. But it's like, it's like my speech is almost influenced by my mood of the day. And so it's like, you can almost hear it when someone, when you pick up the phone to someone and you can feel they're not, there's almost like, there's like a little void in that voice, because they're not feeling good about themselves that day. And there's a feeling. And so it's like, that's why they say, like, pick up the phone, have a smile on, because it changes the whole sound. And it's true, because it changes the internal cavity of your mouth. So it changes the direction of the sound. But so I think, like I think when you asking a bigger question, you're really asking, how would the world be different if I was, a master at communication, or if I increased this skill and stuff. And because it puts the impetus, it has nothing to do with you anymore, which I think is really important. Like, it can't, like, let's say today, of course I would have loved to like just sit down, watch Netflix in the evening. But do you know what? It's like when you realize this isn't about you, and I don't mean you, I mean like me, for example. Like, it's not about me, it's not about how I feel, it's about what I'm doing. And all of a sudden you get past those feeling of, oh, maybe I'd rather sleep, or maybe I'd rather do this, or, the procrastination. And I think it's like, then all of a sudden you have this purpose. And I think that's where that's why people's voice comes through, and the purpose, what's a bigger purpose than you asking the question, well, how would the world be different if I was a better communicator, or if I actually went out there and just did the shit? You know what I'm saying? It's like, are you out there doing it? And it has nothing to do with us and how we feel. It's just nothing. That's what helps us do, what helps me sometimes to do things that I may not always be in the mood for, because motivation doesn't come straight away. It comes afterwards. Like now I'm well excited. I'm well into it. But, we all have those days, right?
I'm with you. Absolutely, Angie. I think this idea of how do you constantly stay motivated? Because in public speaking, it's a lot harder to do that because the goalpost is a lot more vague. So say me and you're running a marathon together. The reason I stay motivated is not just because you're banging on my door at 5 a.m. and say, Brenden, we got to go for a run, and I got to stay accountable to it, but also because I can see both of us finishing the race. right? So we both get across the finish line. I get the participation ribbon, you get the gold one. But the difference is that we see it. But in public speaking, what does being a great speaker even mean? And the answer is there is no answer. Right? There's a couple of things, right? Like, okay, less filler words or things like that. But
What's
it's
a
much
filler word? What's a filler word?
well, filler word is ums or ahs, like
Oh yeah, that's really hard though. Yeah,
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 right.
yeah.
So that's the thing, right? So it's a lot harder for us to hold ourselves accountable to a result when we don't really know what that looks like. So that's the challenge, and you're right. If we have a strong reason why we want to master communication, and we always remind ourselves of that reason, it's a lot easier for us to get to that end point.
Yes, absolutely, and especially nowadays. I think all of us have been impacted mentally, in one way or another, like or emotionally, about what's happened this year. Just purely the isolation and everything. And I think having this thoughts, this like what is a bigger purpose. And I find like for me this year has been really important to really go, what do I really want? Why am I doing any of this for? Because I'm not seeing people most days because people are afraid to meet. And you know what I mean? Like you have to really, like, I think like purpose, like there's this podcast. And do you know this podcast called Don't Keep Your Day Job?
Don't keep your day job?
Do you know it?
No, that sounds
Okay.
interesting.
Yeah, no, it's good. So it's for Kathy Heller. She is the creator and the host of it. And in her introduction, she always says the opposite of depression isn't happiness, it's purpose. And I really believe that. I think that once you have a purpose, all of a sudden you feel lighter, you have a reason, which is why, helping other people make you feel better because you are getting what was the word? You're getting out of your own way because you're not thinking about all your shit, but you're actually helping someone else. And all of a sudden your stuff is put in perspective and you feel a bit better, or at least you have a bit of a respite. And I think, yeah, so that bigger question that you were posing, it really is about, I feel like, about purpose a little bit.
Absolutely. It's this whole idea of significance, right? Once we know that we're adding value to other people in a powerful way, it keeps us aligned and keeps us focused on what we want to achieve.
And is this part of like why you have this YouTube video around, the why of public speaking?
You got it. I just go into a lot more details about how you can construct one. But I think the general idea is even if you just start asking yourself the question, I think that alone will already make you a lot better because most of us, when we think about public speaking, we see it like a chore.
Yeah.
We see it like doing the dishes or, doing the laundry or, like we did. Because all the presentations we get in our lives are not optional. They're mandatory or we have to give them. And that's where the weakness lies. So if we can start thinking of it more of an empowering way to share an idea that matters to people who want to listen to them, that's when public speaking becomes a lot more useful and a lot more fun also.
So of course I wanted people to go and check out the video on the YouTube, but would you be able to just give out like a couple of things here for the listeners if people are like, oh, I don't know what my why is. Like, I don't know, like, why would I, I really love cupcake, but I don't know. I just, what is my why behind explaining the secret behind the best cupcake or, whatever example it is. But where would people start to know what their why is? Like, do you have some help for that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's kind of two different whys, right? There's the one for the public speaking, one for life in general. So let's dive more into the life side of things. I think because a lot of it's intertwined at the end of the day. I think the big thing that we want to focus on when we think about our why and we think about what we want to achieve in our lives, I think a question that not many people ask themselves is they ask themselves too much, what are you passionate about? Which I think is too general and too vague. Like anyone, you can be passionate about anything. Right? You can be passionate about your dog, your cameras, your lights, and that's okay, but it's much harder for you to build something meaningful out of that. Versus a better question that I ask, which is, what does the world need you most to do right now and why? So when I was 12, the answer to that question wasn't start a YouTube channel public speaking. It was help my mother get out of poverty, right? Because I had no money and she definitely didn't. So I just said, I need to get a 6-figure corporate job. Let me figure out what job can get me that kind of income so that I can get out of this tough situation. So I spent, from the ages of 12 to 22 focused on that goal. So I got a job at Pricewaterhouse, then I got a job at IBM, and I was able to achieve that.
Yeah.
But then after I said, okay, what does the world need me most to do right now and why? And that's when I realized that because of all of the decisions I made, not passions, but rather decisions, specific actionable decisions that led me to MasterTalk. Because if I never got a job in corporate, I never would have done case competitions. If I never would have done case competitions, I wouldn't even have the expertise to be on this show to talk about this stuff. So that's really what I think a lot of people are missing, is that they focus too much on trying to find something instead of doing something. And I think if you start to do anything, really, like for example, if you like cupcakes and you wonder what's the best cupcake in the city, I would encourage you to just go try all of them. Is that something you want to do? And then in that same way, it's those questions that lead you to more insights. Another bonus I can give you is this idea that generally speaking, the questions you find interesting to ask yourself that other people don't are the ones you should be following. So I'll give you the best example. So for me, a question I always ask myself is, how do I teach communication in a way that a 5-year-old can understand it? That's a question most people don't give a shit about. It's like I don't care. Like, who cares? In the same way that somebody else can go, I wonder if what behaviors the next generation of people will have. We had Gen Z, Gen X, and all that stuff. I wonder what the next generation's behavior. So that's a question I don't really care about. That's a question somebody else cares about. So that's that idea, is find what that list of questions is for you. What is driving your curiosity and your interests? And that's generally what leads to both an interesting topic for your life, but also the presentation about your life.
That is, like, I agree so much to what you just said. You just have to do. That's how I ended up with this podcast. When I was just like, oh, it just came. Like, I knew I wanted to do one for a long time, but I didn't know about what. And one morning, and I'm not going to tell the whole story here now because it's it's. I think I've mentioned it before on the show, but it literally came to me like in a split second, and I didn't really know what it was going to look like. I was just like, there was all these different things that I wanted to cover and have people on to discuss, because those were the things that I craved an answer for, or those were the things that I wished I'd known when I was 18, and I only found out after I was 40, And I was just like, that is not good enough. I was like, this is not okay. And I honestly did not know really, I hadn't really looked about, I didn't look about what the future would look like with it. I just sort of did it because I just wanted to there and then. And it was kind of like an impulse buy. And, even though I flirted with the idea for a year or two, or maybe a year, but when I started, it was like, this is what I want to do, like, now. And then that was it. And then it's sort of like you say, like, over time, maybe that, then all of a sudden you realize what it is that you want to talk more of. But yeah, I think by doing, like I said, just doing, that's how you don't have to think so far ahead. It's not so much so philosophical all the time. Sometimes it's just a case of just doing it.
I'm absolutely with you on that one. You know what I always find is like this idea that your gifts are the sum of all of the qualities that make you crazy to the average person. So let me repeat that again. Your gifts, your unique gifts, the things that you're meant to do in life that only you can do, is the sum. So it's the addition of everything that the average person would think is crazy about you. So think about me. Right, I speak 3 languages, but I can karaoke in 8. I have a very successful executive coaching practice, but I still live in my mother's basement and I don't own a car. Yeah. Right? So it's not the fact that I do all of these crazy things. It is because I do and communicate all of these crazy things that allows me to create very unique content that nobody on the planet can create. Right, and the best example I can give you to make this more tangible for people, is this idea that because I speak multiple languages, I can make a video on how to present in a second language. Whereas that video has never been created before.
Do you know why you're right? Because like you, I also speak several languages, but I've never been taught how to present in another language. Or, you know what I mean? Like, that is actually quite a good idea.
Right, but that's like one of 1,000 things. Another thing that's even more like funny, I guess, is because I karaoke in 8 different languages, I realized that if you learn, like, the best way to learn pronunciation from that journey is actually to sing songs in languages you don't know. Because if you sing in Korean, you don't have to be good at singing, but it helps you pronounce words better in your first language. So that's a trick that I learned. But it's
Yeah.
because of my own innate insanity for even attempting that allowed me to find a new insight in the industry that nobody else found.
It's like that. It's funny because when you mentioned about the karaoke, it made me think of a scene in this Netflix TV series where they go out of space. Oh, and it's with Hilary Swank, but it's not her, but it's the other woman, how she learns English going through karaoke.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. But it makes sense because I think like when you have fun, or because music is something we've all listened and you can kind of get the gist. But yeah, no, it makes sense. No, but I love that you're honest about the you've got this executive coaching business, but you live in the basement at your mom's, and you don't own a car. And I'm like, that is so refreshing because everyone else is like, yeah, look at this jet that I just like rented for 10 minutes because I can't afford it, and I'm gonna have this Gucci bag which I again rented, and it's like, you know, it's all so fake, and it's like, you know, real life is and whatever is that what makes you happy and what you want in life does not have to be what social media tells you should be, or society in general. So no, I like that. I wanted to ask you, Zoe, about how to get over the fear of public speaking, but I wanted to kind of like already answer that because we talked about, you know, the format and the question behind, you know, the why, and, you know, what would be different in the world if you did it. But would there be anything, like, do you want me to ask you that question? Should I ask you that question? Is there anything else to add on that?
Yeah, of course, I'm happy to add more.
Yeah.
I would say the general idea behind the fear of public speaking is this idea that as long as the message matters more than the fear, you'll always be successful. Because the fear will always be there. You know, I always like to equate fear to like a boxing match. So in a boxing match, on one side of the ring, you have your fear. On the other side, you have your message. So the fear will always be in the ring. But as long as your message gets the knockout punch, you'll always be successful. And I always like to use the example of Brene Brown. So for those who don't know, she's like a top.
Oh my God. Yeah. Everybody go watch her TED Talk.
Yeah, she's great.
Unbelievable. She's actually funny, even though she's not a comedian. She's really funny.
Oh, she is.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating about her, and she, once again, top speaker in the world, expert in vulnerability. But what's fascinating is in her first TED Talk, she even mentions it in the talk that she doesn't like public speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Right? She goes, yeah, I'm a PhD in social work. I really don't like this public speaking stuff, but hey, got to share a message. But the question we need to ask ourselves is, why does Brene make the decision to do it anyways? That's a more fascinating question to think about. And here's the answer. The answer is simple. For the single mother who has 7 kids, what do I mean by that? Brene knows, as much as I do, that if we leave our information in books and research papers, we don't tap a majority of the world. Because that single mother who has 7 kids, she doesn't have time to read her book.
No, she doesn't.
She doesn't have time to read every annotation in her 5-year research project. So Brene, much like all of us, had to make a choice. And that choice was, do I share my information with a wider range of people? Do I simplify my message? Do I spend 30 minutes out of my life to give this presentation? Or do I never share my message with that single mother? And she made her choice. In the same way, when I started MasterTalk at the bright old age of 22, right, I had a decision to make. I noticed all these PhDs were a lot more experienced than me, a lot more knowledge than I did, but they weren't simplifying their information enough. So it's either I did nothing, and the only thing a 16-year-old girl would have access to is a 50-year-old man's advice on how to speak that is totally outdated, or she would listen to me if I had the courage to make those videos. And I ended up doing that. But the point I want to drive is, in the same way Brene made her choice and I made mine, and you made yours, now everyone else who's listening needs to make theirs.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Actually, I've actually got a follow-up question on that because, yeah, it's all very well and good. I'm like, yeah, I've got this podcast, I'm doing it. But when it comes to videos, so you do YouTube, right? Brene Brown, she went on TED Talk, which is, you know, video as well. Like how do we, because you do talks on videos. I know I'm good. I can do videos, you know, I used to be a performer, all of that stuff, so I can do that. But I have this block. I will pick something I don't like about myself and I'll refuse to do a video and I'll be like beating myself down. But I have a block going out on YouTube and doing the video. I don't know, like, I don't know if it's like a vanity thing. And I'm like, oh, do I really want to be on there? Who's going to work? You know, it's like, oh, it's not that interesting. Like, how do you, because audio, I love audio. And it's like this intimate feeling, and I can literally be in my pajamas, and it's great. But how do you have a tip for like video people like me who may also feel like
Absolutely.
this block? And it's very selfish questions. Obviously, it's like self-serving for me. I'm like,
Yeah,
how do I get past this? But
doing what's self-serving is usually the best way to keep yourself and everyone around you happy, in my opinion. So I think it's the right approach. But here's my take. First of all, I would acknowledge you. Right? I'd acknowledge you for even starting a podcast, for even trying something, because most people don't even try one medium, right? Whether it's a podcast or even a blog, right? So I would start the conversation there. Understand that you're already juggling 4 balls, and that's pretty good, right? So that's the first part. The second part of that is asking yourself if you want to move in that direction, and what is the consequence, the positive consequence and the negative consequence of doing that for yourself. So for me, I'm a big advocate of this idea is you don't need to be on video to share your ideas with the world. This podcast is more than fine. But there's definitely a plus of doing that. The biggest one is that it's a much easier for you to connect with your audience because they see you, they feel you, right? The emotions that come out of your face as you're talking to them on camera. There's a new level of energy that they just can't get on audio. So for those of you who do want to push to video, who are already doing other mediums, the only question that matters is who suffers from your inability to take action every day.
Yeah.
Every day that you make the decision not to be on video, is there anyone who suffers because of that? And if you're already on audio, maybe that answer is no. But if you're not creating anything at all, that answer is absolutely yes. Because the more specific you are about that person, the easier it is to produce content for them. So I'll give you the best example, because all of us start the same way. I thought MasterTalk was the stupidest idea. Who would listen to a dude in his mother's basement, making YouTube videos on public speaking and communication? It didn't make any sense to me. I was just making them for fun, really. I was just like, oh, well, 2 people are asking me for it. Might as well do it. And then 2 turned into 10 subscribers, then to 15. But the difference was I knew who those 15 people were, right? They were my buddies from university. And then one day, I was probably 6 or 7 months into MasterTalk. Once again, still thought it was a dumb idea. I never had any intention of leaving work or pursuing this full time. But then I met this 16-year-old girl, and I asked her why she was scared of public speaking. She just panicked. And that's when I realized in that moment why my videos mattered. Because if I wanted to reach to every 16-year-old girl in the format that I could only teach it, where it's effective, which is YouTube videos, I needed to get on video, and I need to take this more seriously. We're all going to think our ideas are stupid. There's no exception. Every single person I know has thought their idea was stupid at the beginning. The only way to move past that is to have somebody else tell you the idea isn't stupid, which is generally your core audience. That's why I'm a big advocate of having dinner, and I'm very serious about this, having dinner with the people that are actually watching your stuff and just asking them point blank, why do you listen to me? And when they pour their hearts into you, that's when you start to make a much more effective decision, so to speak. And that's why I write my content 3 years in advance now. Now I'm a nut job, but I definitely didn't start that way.
Yeah, so no, thank you for this, and I think it's true, like, everything that you said. And I think it's interesting because it is actually, I should be taking even my own advice from earlier. It's like, getting out of my own way, because again, it has nothing to do with me. My message has not, as much as our messages has something to do with us and who we are as a person, the way we deliver it is obviously unique to us. But at the same time, I really believe like it has, in the sense of, so it's like really getting out of my own way. It doesn't matter if I think I look tired. No one gives a shit. Even if you do health and wellness, if you have good good information people can use. They don't give a shit, because I most certainly don't. I mean, obviously there's a minimum, like, but it's like, yeah, it's your own insecurities about how you look shouldn't be dictating what you do in life. And I think that is something I definitely need to assimilate and actually embody, and just go out there and do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because also it's true, when you see people on video, there's Instagram accounts I follow, and the minute they're on video or they do lives, like, I'm totally hooked. I'm like, oh, if I like their personality, I'm like, oh, wow, yeah, that makes sense now. I get it. It's like, yeah, there's something dynamic with that, engaging. So what's your number one piece of advice to the listeners? Like, if there was anything you'd want them to take away, what would that be?
Yeah, I would say, I always like to leave with my favorite quote, Angie. My favorite quote of all time. The advice is, be insane or be the same. If you want to be like everyone else, that's totally fine. But if you made it an hour into this interview, you probably want to do something important with your life. It's probably some difference you want to make. So the only advice that really matters at the end of the day is the following. The people who do end up making a difference in the world are crazy. Don't you find it odd that a 22-year-old kid like me started a YouTube channel in my mother's basement? Not on pranks, not on vlogs, not on comedy skits, but on public speaking and communication. Then he went on to coach big executives of companies at the age of 23. But once again, lives in his mother's basement, is literally talking to Angie on the mattress he sleeps on, doesn't own a car, dances alone in his basement, karaoke's in 8 languages. Oh, and by the way, loves Justin Bieber. How does any of this make any sense at all? And that, my friends, is the point. When every decision in your life makes sense to the only person that matters, which is you, you'll probably be successful. So be insane or be the same.
Absolutely. Just be true to yourself. Be comfortable with whatever it is that you want to do, and how you want to live your life. Absolutely. Love that. Thank you so much for this, Brenden. We've now come to the end, and I'm going to ask you the same 2 questions that I ask all of my guests. So the first one is, what would you tell your 18-year-old self?
Oh, be insane or be the same. Same
I
piece of advice.
You're going to say that.
Same piece of advice.
I was like, that question's redundant now. And then the next one is, what stuff do you not put up with anymore?
What stuff do you not put up with anymore? Definitely negative people. I haven't had a negative person in my life, I believe. I actually forgot. So I think it's 5. Has it been 5 years? 4?
Wow.
Yeah, I don't have a single negative person in my life, Angie, and it's really made a difference. To the point that I literally believe every human being is positive. It's actually it's really weird for the psyche in a good way. I think you need to cut your negative friends loose. They're a waste of time and a waste of the very limited time you have on this earth.
Wow. But how about you have a positive friend, but they're going through a rough time? Or is that different? Is that different from, like, I guess, like, you mean like someone who's always negative?
Absolutely. That's definitely very different. So there's like 3 different layers to this. So there's one is the obvious, always negative all the time. We don't have time for that. Let's get rid of that.
Yeah.
The other part is someone who's a really, really good friend who's having what I call a patch. So a patch is they're having a rough patch in the middle of, like, let's say at some point in their life, and they take a couple of months, maybe even a couple of weeks to recover. But then there's the third category, and that's a decision everyone's going to make, and it's a tough one, is someone who's been really good to you and gets into a long patch. So that means that I'm just making this word up as I'm kind of talking here to kind of explain this, but it's like they start to become alcoholics. They start to get into a run direction. You just know you can't pull them out. You have a tough decision at that point to make, and it's not one for me to make for the audience. But what I will say is, if you stick to those people, they will bring you down eventually, even if they were good to you. So it's tough decisions you got to make in life. But But I think the general idea is avoid negative people if you can, and take care of the people who are good to you, especially if those bad periods are not very long.
Please tell us, where can the listeners find you? How can they work with you? Do you do stuff online? People who live, like, in a different country? Like, give us all the good stuff.
Of course. Yeah, it's very simple for today, Angie. All you got to do if you want to get in touch is the YouTube channel. So just go ahead and type MasterTalk in one word, and you'll find all of my content there for free for you to learn from and grow.
So Brenden, thank you. Thank you so much for today.
Pleasure was mine. Thanks for having me, Ange.
And that's our episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to rate, review, share it, subscribe it on iTunes, follow it on Spotify, or whichever platform you listen from. However you show love is how you can support this show. Drop me your questions or suggestions for future episodes via the website at angie-s.com, or come and find me on Instagram at @toolfordishitpodcast. See you next week, and until then,
Using health inappropriately.